Oh, hey everybody, how you been doing? Hope you had a good week. Episode 2 of Tales from a Technician. We last left it off. I'd gone through high school, did some crazy stuff, and had a good time growing up, and got my first job set up, ready to go. Well, left there all excited, rode my bicycle back home. It's kind of funny, 18 years old, driver's license, no car. Rode my bike back home, was all excited. And I believe that was a couple days before I graduated high school. So I'll stick a picture here of me graduating high school, or that day anyhow. Now I did talk about Alvin and Shannon in the last episode. My girlfriend and I, Alvin was my buddy, and my girlfriend's girlfriend was Shannon. So we fixed them up and we went on a double date. And those two did not talk to each other the whole time. The whole night. I don't know, maybe high or something. Anyhow, they're still married to this day. And we'll keep them in this series along the way, a time or two, because Alvin's always he's always in my life somehow or another. I wish I could see him a lot more often, that's for sure. Anyhow, had a week after I graduated high school before I started my job. And I believe I started on the 5th or 6th of July. It was right at something like that. So during that week, Mom, for a graduation present, bought me a train ticket to ride up to Chicago and see my buddy Alan Thompson. Been good fishing buddies and all that since we were in 5th grade, you know. So I went up and visited him and all that. Got back, and we're gonna start my new job. Well, I had a bicycle and I had tools. Of course, they'd asked, I had, Harry and George wanted to make sure I had a decent set of hand tools to start with. Well, my dad got to poking around and found a roll-around toolbox. I remember him saying something about, well, here, I got this for you from a guy at work. I just didn't want you to, I wanted you to have a little something more than just that little toolbox that I always took to school every day. And it was kind of nice of him. We didn't have a lot of money and all that, and I know he didn't have a lot of money. It was just a little Craftsman, little rusty thing. It had 2 slide-out drawers, and the bottom of it had a door that flipped over and slid inside, And I'd put my little hand toolbox on top of it. So hey, I kind of had a toolbox, like a man toolbox. So first thing that morning, I think it was probably about 7:30 in the morning, loaded up my bicycle, my 2 toolboxes, and put them in the back of Dad's van. And that van, by the way, sometime before this, he wanted me to change oil and put a radio in it for him. So I was good with that. Heck yeah. So I sat out there and got the oil draining out, got up inside of it, was hooking up the radio, and I was afraid the battery was going to die. So heck, fired it up, let it run a little bit, keep that battery charged up. I go on about hooking up the radio and all that stuff, and engine dies. Buh. As soon as it died, it hit me that there was no oil in it. Oh boy, you want to talk about, oh. So I put the drain plug in, changed the filter, stuck like 3 quarts of oil in it just to see what happens, and it started up. It was a little rattly, but it ran, it quieted down a little bit, and phew! They probably took some miles off of that Chevy van's old, like a 305 or something like that. Sorry, Dad. I never told him. So he takes me to work in this van and drops me off. Good luck, son. Ride your bicycle back home whenever you're done, So I get my tools inside, and there's Harry McDaniel first thing in the morning. He says, Michael Calvert. He said, good. I don't even think he even filled out paperwork back then. I don't remember. Maybe I did. I don't remember. He said, put your tools over against that wall. So I rolled them over there. He walks along with me. He says, you just pay attention around here, help out when you can. Somebody needs you to do something, you go do it. Okay. He said, lunchtime, take your lunch hour. He says, you need to get out of this place. It's 1 hour, get out of this place. You're going to thank me for that. So, okay. And that very first day, I don't know that I did too much. I did a lot of watching and helping out. Yeah, and I probably hadn't even done an oil change yet. And Here come lunchtime. I didn't know anybody. I had a bicycle. I didn't have hardly any money in my pocket. Went over to the vending machine and bought one of those honey buns. I remember going back over and sitting on the workbench that was next to my toolbox, eating my honey bun. Here come Harry McDaniel. What'd I tell you about lunch? I said, Harry, I got a bicycle. I don't have any money. Where am I going to go for an hour? He said, walk around the parking lot. He says, you need to get out of this dang place when you have the chance. He said, trust me, you need to do that every day. Get out of here. Okay. So I went and walked around the parking lot, looked at cars out in the parking lot. I don't know what I did. And come back, you know. It was all cool, and I got to changing oil a little bit, and they hired a kid the same day or the next day after me, kid just like me, you know, and they always looked at us kids like, well, he's not going to make it. Maybe he'll make it a week or two, and they'll get lucky and find one that sticks around. Well, this kid worked about 2 days, and we were out in the parking lot, this is the middle of July, moving cars, like a porter. Get in a hot car and move it, get in another hot car and move it. This kid got some kind of heat stroke or something, went home sick early, and didn't even come back next day. And I didn't think much of it. I just thought, yeah, it's pretty hot. But on Wednesday nights, they would have free oil changes. They had a coupon that I believe was in the newspaper or something like that. The only time they would do them is on Wednesday nights, because we were open till 7 or 8, I think, on a Wednesday night, 8 o'clock. So I'd be there working. Old George Harlan, he would pull them cars in, and there'd be nobody else in the shop. I don't remember anybody else being there but me and George Harlan. He'd pull them cars in like 3 or 4 stalls at a time and bring me the filters. I'd change the oil and put the oil in them. He'd pull them out, pull 3 or 4 more in. I remember they had a little drive up to 38th Street, and cars parked waiting in line down 38th Street to get in to get their free oil change. And I remember a couple of those nights leaving out of there after it was done and being so exhausted and tired. I just thought I was going to die. I'd get out there and just want to cry. Not even want to drive home yet, or bicycle home. But after a couple, 3 weeks, I saved up my paychecks. I remember they were like, I think I started making $5.50 an hour. I wasn't flat rate yet. I just hourly. And I saved up paychecks that I didn't even cash. And I got to looking in the paper. I thought, man, I got to find something to drive. I was riding this bicycle back and forth, because one time I'd put a customer's car outside, put them keys in my pocket, and forgot about them, and rode my bicycle all the way back home. It wasn't that far, but it was far enough as a bicycle ride. When I got home, emptied my pockets out, I was like, oh no. Hopped back on my bike. I pedaled fast as I could back to the dealership. Good old Palmer Dodge City West. Had them keys in my hand, and there was Paul Anderson. Paul Anderson was a service advisor. Scary and mean. That's all I thought at first, scary and mean. Mike Calvert, give me them keys. Boy, he's cussing me. I didn't hear the end of it for about a month from him. Where's them keys at? You didn't put them in your pocket, did you? Nope, sure didn't. And of course, you got beat on. You got beat on as a kid in a shop like that, because nowadays you can't get away with stuff like that. With the kidding around, the joking around, and the hazing, it was downright hazing. It wasn't nothing else. It was hazing. Abuse. It was abuse. If any kind of crappy thing that nobody else wanted to do that was stuck out in the parking lot, have him do it. He'll go do it. They learned real quick. I'd do whatever they wanted me to do. I'd go at it. But I remember one time that, I don't know what I did to the car, but George Harlan, I think he paged me over the phone. We had phones, the kind you dialed over, there were no cell phones. Paged me up there. I come up there as a customer standing there, and he says, Mike, you worked on this guy's van. I'm like, okay. Did you take the change out of his center console? Well, no, George, I did not. He goes, oh, you didn't, huh? I believe you did. And then he goes around to the cashiers, grabs a handful of change, gives it to the guy and says, I'm sorry, I'll take care of him. I hope this don't affect how we do business together. The guy's like, oh no, it's cool. You made it right, thanks. And he walks off. I looked at George, I said, man, you know I didn't take it. I don't steal nothing. He goes, oh, I know you didn't. I was just trying to make the guy feel better. That's always stuck with me, you know. You can't do that to a kid nowadays, but you could then. Turns out a couple days later, guy pops back in and says, hey, I want to give you your change back. My son took that change out of the van and I didn't know it. George's like, no, keep the change. It's cool. Of course, George let me know what had really happened, and he knew I never would have stole anything. You know. Anyway, get to on down the line a little bit. I got to knowing some of the guys, getting to working a little bit, and they decided that you need to work with Elmer Duke. We're gonna have you stick with Elmer Duke. He's gonna show you the ropes, show you some stuff. Elmer Duke was pretty cool. I really liked Elmer. He was kind of my first closest buddy there. He was older than me. He'd worked for the state garage where they worked on all the state cop cars and all that stuff. And you know, and he was a pretty good old guy. But to back up, and I forgot to tell you about the 3 paychecks I took and cashed them, and bought me a car. A 1965 Chevy van, flat nose, engine right here. I could adjust the timing and the carburetor while I was driving down the road. I went and looked at it, $300. Sold. I got me wheels now, so I drove that thing around, you know. But back to the story. Old Elmer he was a suspension guy, differential kind of guy, and you know, so he taught. That's pretty early on, when first 5 or 6 years of McPherson struts, and got to learn how to do all that stuff, and you know, finally they got to, and this is, you know, a couple of months down the road, I remember George Harlan saying, hey, you know, I think we're losing money on you, so we're gonna give you a technician number. And they wanted me to flag everything I did just so they could track it. I was still getting paid hourly, same amount, but they wanted to track what I did. Well, you know how that went. Anything free, anything the advisors didn't want to make a technician do that they couldn't get paid for, they had me do it. So yeah, I looked like I made about 10 hours a week. Well, that went on for a little while, and I'll tell you here in a minute what happened there. But back then I had a lot of hair. And George Harlan was saying, man, you're gonna have to cut that hair. About once a day. You think about cutting that hair, you're gonna have to cut that hair. This is all the same time that I'd be late once in a while, or something would happen and I'd call in, because, you know, I was a kid. I'd go out, I had a car now, I had my van, I'd go out running around and late at night, and I'd wake up late and get there late. And George finally told me, he said, you're late one time, you miss one more day, he said, you're gonna be fired on the spot. Just plan on it, you're gonna be fired. Then it's the haircut thing. You're gonna have to cut your hair. I'm like, man, these guys are tough. Now I gotta cut my hair. I can't even be late. Well, got to knowing some of these guys that I'd worked with, and John Wesley hollered at me over. He said, come over here. And there's Roy McClure standing there next to him. And they'd always want to show me stuff, you know, and it seemed like they was pretty friendly, trying to teach me things, and it was usually a trick. Somehow or another there was a trick involved. So I knew something was up. So I walked over there, and I see George Harlan over here in the corner of my eye. So I'm looking at Roy McClure. I feel this arm go across my chest and pull me backwards. Roy McClure grabs my feet, and so now all of a sudden I'm horizontal. John Wesley grabs the hair clippers and goes, and I'm freaking out because they're going to force me to cut my hair. They let me go, and they're all laughing. Ha ha, they just thought that was the funniest thing ever. But I didn't think it was funny at all. Okay. Finally, George's like, man, Mike, you cut that hair, I'll pay for it. So finally, after a couple of days, I gave up. Said, fine, you're going to pay. He said, we'll go down here to the barber where I go, and I'll pay for it. But you're going to get your hair cut the way I want it cut. I'm like, what's this guy, my dad now? You know. All right, let's go. Screw it. Cut the hair off. So we jump in his old Ford truck. It was like lunchtime, I think we was going to go get our hair cut. We get driving down, I think that was, had been 30th Street, driving down. He says, you smoke? I said, yeah, I smoke cigarettes. He goes, no, this. This is my boss. I was like, oh. He said, light that. Okay. So we smoked that. Got my hair cut. I got stoned with the boss. Like, you know, he was assistant service manager, so, you know, whatever. You do what you say, what you're told. So, and then for too long, Don Palmer was going to have a little get-together at the Claude Nanny's. That was a pub. George come and said, well, you need to plan on going because, you know, Mr. Palmer's going to look down on you if you don't go. I said, George, I called him George, I believe by that time. I said, hell, I said, I'm 18 years old. I can't go in there. And he looked at me and he's like, He said, well, walk in with the rest of us. It'll be fine. So, okay, sure enough, it was fine. Nobody said nothing. You know, that just shows you the kind of culture it was back then. Nowadays, oh, no. Can't do that stuff nowadays. You know, and I got brought up around drinking and all that. And when I was in high school, I drank beer. Still do. But you know, that was just the kind of thing that was going on all the time. And but at the same time, man, I'd get beat up at work every day. It'd be a brand new dashboard on a Dodge Colt DL station wagon. You can't get them, so they wanted me to take one out of another one and put it in this other one and swap them. Swapping wheels and tires in the parking lot. I used to take gas tanks out of them B vans, set the gas tank on my chest, roll it off, pull it out, put a good sending unit in it, and out there in the parking lot doing stuff like that. You know. And I remember pretty early on, within the first month, probably less than that, we've been doing these Wednesday night free oil changes. I'm out in the parking lot, and I think I was headed out to leave, and I hear Mr. Calvert. I'm looking around, and there's a guy come walking at me, and I'd never met him before. Didn't know who he was. He had a uniform on like I wore, but this guy looked kind of stern and marching at me, you know, and I'm thinking, man, what did I do now? He goes, you Mike Calvert? I'm like, yeah, I am. He says, you changed the oil in my wife's van the other night, or last night or something. I forget what he said. I said, okay, I probably did. And he's here. Hands me a $20 bill. I said, I don't want that. He goes, why not? I said, well, it was a free oil change. Why are you going to give me $20 to do a free oil change? You had a coupon, didn't you? He's like, yeah, I did, but I want to take care of anybody who takes care of me. He said, you took care of me, here's $20. That guy's name was Ron Gregory. And kind of back in these days and these times, Ron was sort of a painting legend. He was a painter. He worked in the body shop. He worked in that body shop until they finally closed it down, you know. I'll stick a picture of him up here, and this picture was probably a bit before he passed away, but just the last couple years, I think he'd passed away. He was one of those guys, man, that's all he did was work. He'd go to his house on the weekends, on a Saturday, cut the grass, go to the post office and all that, take care of the bills, get them all paid, and then he'd turn around and come right back to the shop. And he lived in Putnamville, I believe. It's not that far, but it's far enough. He didn't want to drive back and forth, so he just spent the night at the shop. He'd sleep on cardboard on the concrete floor and work all night. That's just what he did. And if you had him to do something for you, paint something up, fix something up, you couldn't get him to take any money. I mean, I don't remember it. It was many years later. I had Ron paint, I think, a fender or something for me that I was putting on one of my dad's cars that he'd wrecked, and I'd brought him like $100 bill to pay for it. No, ain't taking that. Well, he always kept his cigarettes up in the top square drawer of his Snap-on toolbox. So when he went around, I snuck back there and I put that $100 underneath his pack of cigarettes, closed the door. About an hour later, here he come, madder than a hornet. I mean, he was mad, red in the face, mad. Mr. Calvert, because he always called me Mr. Calvert. I always called him Mr. Gregory. I told you I wasn't taking anything. And he took that $100 bill and he stuck it in my pocket and walked away. He said, "Don't you even dare do that again." It's one of those kind of people. Heck, I'm not even like that. I'm a nice guy, but he would not take nothing from nobody. You know, he'd work and make his paycheck, and that's all he wanted to do. You know, and Ron was always cool because he'd be back there in the body shop. Well, I got to hanging out in the body shop. Started doing alignments, and they decided I need to be the guy to learn how to do alignments because nobody really liked doing alignments. So I did alignments. Well, I'd go hang out in the body shop, kind of, you know, figured out, man, these guys are fixing up this bent up stuff and they're wanting me to fix it. And if I couldn't align it, I'd bring them over and go, "Here, I seen when you was working on this car, I think its control arm's a little bit forward or it's back. Maybe you need to get a pull on it and tug it forward," and show them the numbers, explain it to them. And then body shop guys loved that. They really liked that. So I'd go back there and hang out with the body shop guys when I could, trying to check on them, see what they were up to, and just learn. You know, I should have been a body guy probably. But you know, we'd be back there smoking stuff and hanging out, and got to get to know my buddy Bill Andrews. Bill, you see this, buddy, man, you know, you've always meant a lot to me. We had a whole lot of history. I ended up buying my first house from him. It's just you know, and he's still buddies with me. He's my MGA buddy. If you look through the videos on this, he's in one of those videos. So all them guys are really good, and we, you know, and I got to doing alignments, got to doing suspension work. Oh, Harry, man, Harry was blind as a bat at this point. And but I tell you what, I'd put him in the back of a car trying to find a noise, and he'd pinpoint exactly where that was. And I remember the very last time I saw him, he was in the hospital, and took my buddy Hubert. Hubert's another one. I'll stick his picture up here. You know, and all these guys are really good friends, and a lot of our friendly times outside of work revolved around partying, because that's what you did. You know, and Hubert, he saved me in a lot of ways, and he never realized, and I wished I'd have told him. He's no longer with us neither. But I was with a girl, and because of a circumstance I really don't want to get into in this series, you know, we were going to get married and all this stuff. And I remember Hubert looking at me on his little kitchen table. He said, "You love her?" I was like, "Well, yeah." He said, "You hesitated. You better not marry her." Sure enough, a couple days later, not getting married. Things would have been way different if I hadn't listened to him or thought about what he'd said, you know. But in all this time, I'm getting better and better, and people wanted me to help them figure stuff out, because I could figure stuff out, especially suspension-wise and all that. Then ABS brakes came out. Boy, wouldn't nobody in that shop touch ABS brake problem. ABS light, what's that? Nope, ain't doing it. Of course, being the new guy around, the one that would do just about whatever you wanted him to do. "Hey, look at this, see if you can figure it out." Okay. Well, it was easy to figure out. It wasn't that bad. I ended up going to a class for it in Cincinnati, driving it was like a 1990 Dodge Daytona, you know, 4-speed or a four-cylinder little, you know, it was a neon with big bumpers on the front and the back. But not a neon, but a Horizon or an Omni type thing. So I figured out that, man, if I learned how to do stuff that nobody else did, then I've got something, you know. Before long, you had people we had a North store, which is not very far away, another Palmer Dodge, and they'd send stuff, the ABS stuff, because they didn't want to work on it. Some other dealers were like, yeah, we heard you're pretty good at it. Here to see if you can't figure out what's wrong with this one. And it wasn't that hard to figure them out. So it was suspension and brakes, anti-lock brakes. I got to where, my head got to going like this, right? I could figure stuff out. And these other guys that were older than me, I was helping them figure out this kind of stuff. And so my head got bigger and bigger and bigger. Before too long, old Harry McDaniel decided he didn't want to be service manager anymore. And I think he retired and then kind of worked part-time as a porter. And he'd always tell me, Michael, you're doing more than you should be. I'm like, what do you mean, Harry? He said, hell, you're still wet behind the ears. He said, you're too young for what you're doing. I'm like, well, then I'd always disagree with him. No, I'm not. Yeah, you are. No, I'm not. Yeah, you are. Or he'd say, well, don't shit in your bed because you might have to sleep in it. He was right. That old Butch White was trying to be service manager, and I'd get into it, and I'd get in an attitude, and he and I'd get in arguments, and I'd get in trouble, and he was sticking up for me, and I didn't know it. And I always just thought he was being difficult, being mean, and he wasn't. He was sticking up for me in the background. I just never knew it. Well, Butch White was another good one, really. Got to being pretty good friends with him over the years too. But anyhow, I decided I didn't want to work there no more. This is after 3 or 4 years of all my friends, all the stuff I'd been through. And really at the time, I was hanging around with the wrong kind of crowd, doing a lot of things I shouldn't. And it got my head all messed up. Being a kid, I always learned stuff the hard way. So anyway, I put in my time, told them, yeah, I'm leaving. Well, it didn't work out so well. So we'll, we're going to touch base on it, episode 3, for what happens. It's a doozy. These things don't get any less crazy, And I'll tell you, for you younger ones are watching this and all that, doing any kind of drinking or any kind of drug use, just don't. Just don't do it. Right? Especially nowadays, you can't, because you don't know what you're getting. Anyway, appreciate you sitting in and watching. Sunday, we're going to get back to this MGA. Man, we're pretty close to firing this up. It won't happen next video, but close. Peace. Remember, if it was easy, everybody be doing it.